In the mid-90s, the world watched in shock as the trial of O.J. Simpson unfolded. A star athlete, beloved for his charm and success both on and off the field, was suddenly thrust into a scandal that would define a generation. Simpson was accused of the brutal murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman. What followed was an intense legal battle, filled with drama, surprises, and, ultimately, a not guilty verdict that left many questions unanswered. Despite the acquittal, numerous aspects of the case have remained clouded in mystery. Was O.J. Simpson truly innocent? And now, with him gone, can the families of the victims ever find closure and justice? This is the truth the scientists have now revealed. After the murders, the events surrounding O.J. Simpson became a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. Initially, he was not arrested right away, which caused many people to wonder why someone so closely connected to the crime was allowed to move freely. Instead of hiding quietly, Simpson appeared in public and carried on in ways that baffled both the police and the public. He claimed he was innocent, speaking firmly about his lack of involvement, yet the choices he made seemed to contradict his words. He traveled, met with friends, and behaved in ways that made it difficult for anyone to fully understand his state of mind. People watched the unfolding situation closely, trying to piece together why someone claiming innocence would act so openly. The media covered every moment, amplifying the confusion and turning each action into a new question about his guilt or innocence. As the days passed, the story only became more tangled, with Simpson's statements and movements creating a complex puzzle for investigators and the public alike. The world struggled to reconcile his calm public appearances with the shocking nature of the crimes, and each twist seemed to deepen the mystery of what he truly felt or intended. This period after the murders became almost as notorious as the crimes themselves, leaving a lasting impression on those who followed the case closely, and showing how actions after a crime can sometimes speak louder than words. In 1994 and 1995, the trial of O.J. Simpson became a captivating national spectacle, drawing in millions of viewers across the United States. It was the first time such a high-profile case had been nationally televised, and the public was riveted. People were glued to their screens, eager to witness the unfolding drama. The trial brought an unprecedented level of attention to the criminal justice system, as viewers watched the intricate legal proceedings in real time. This made the case not just a legal battle, but also a cultural event. News outlets, journalists, and legal experts provided ongoing commentary, and the trial became a topic of constant conversation. The broadcast gave viewers an inside look at the courtroom, something that was previously reserved for those physically present. For many, it was the first time they had seen such a high-profile case, so thoroughly aired in the media, making it a defining moment in the history of television coverage of legal proceedings. O.J. Simpson's legal outcomes remain one of the most talked-about cases in modern American history. In 1994, O.J. Simpson, a former NFL star and actor, was accused of the brutal murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman. The trial that followed, which lasted for nearly a year, captivated the nation. Simpson, with the help of a highly skilled legal team, including the famous Dream Team of lawyers, was ultimately found not guilty of the murders in what many still consider a controversial verdict. The case sparked debates about race, celebrity, and the legal system, making it a defining moment in American legal history. However, the legal battle did not end there. In 1997, Simpson faced a civil trial where the burden of proof was lower than in a criminal trial. This time, he was found responsible for the deaths of Nicole and Ronald Goldman. The civil jury awarded $33 million in damages to the Goldman family, a ruling that stood in stark contrast to the criminal trial's outcome. Despite being held financially liable, Simpson did not face criminal penalties, and the Goldman family struggled to collect the full amount of the judgment. Over the years, the case has remained in the public's consciousness. The fascination with Simpson's trial and its aftermath continues, especially after his passing. Even decades after the trial, many aspects of the case continue to raise questions, leaving the public puzzled and invested in the story. The case, with its twists and turns, has left an indelible mark on both American culture and the legal landscape, and it remains a topic of speculation and intrigue. The murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman occurred sometime between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. on June 12, 1994. Just after 11 p.m., O.J. Simpson entered a waiting limo and headed to Los Angeles International Airport for a flight to Chicago. It's difficult to grasp the irony of the situation. While Simpson was flying first class, Two people were already dead just outside his ex-wife's home. Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman were discovered dead shortly after midnight. The investigation quickly became a media frenzy, but what's most staggering is the speed with which Simpson returned to Los Angeles. By noon the following day, O.J. Simpson had already landed back in the city. The timeline of these events raised countless questions and added to the complexity of the case. On June 17, 1994, O.J. Simpson was finally arrested after a dramatic 4-day delay. The delay raised questions for many people who were watching from the outside, wondering why he wasn't immediately detained despite the mounting evidence against him. Police had already questioned him but did not arrest him right away. This decision puzzled the public, especially since there were signs that seemed to directly link him to the crime. Blood was found in his car, and a glove that matched one found at the crime scene was discovered on his property. These pieces of evidence were significant, and many expected Simpson to be taken into custody right away. Instead, the delay in his arrest sparked a great deal of public and media speculation. The fact that he wasn't arrested immediately seemed strange, especially given the severity of the situation and the visible evidence. The delay in arrest only added to the drama surrounding the case and intensified the public's curiosity about the decision-making process of the police at that time. Fame can change the speed at which things are revealed, especially with celebrity cover-ups. UCLA law professor Peter Aronella suggested that O.J. Simpson's celebrity status could have influenced the delay in his arrest. Instead of treating him like a regular suspect, the detectives may have treated him more like a celebrity. This notion highlights how a person's public image and high-profile status can alter how law enforcement handles situations. In the case of O.J. Simpson, his fame and wealth may have resulted in the investigators approaching the case with more caution, perhaps hoping to avoid a public relations disaster or even believing that his status could shield him from scrutiny. This could explain the hesitations and delays that were seen in the way the investigation was initially conducted. The influence of fame on legal proceedings is a complex issue, as it can lead to biases or a more lenient approach to high-profile individuals. The treatment of Simpson during the investigation and arrest raised questions about whether celebrities are given special consideration or protection under the law, further complicating the already complex nature of the case. Later in the early afternoon of June 17th, the police made a shocking announcement that O.J. Simpson was now a suspect in the murders, and they were actively trying to bring him in. For hours, the nation watched and waited, wondering if one of America's most beloved sports figures might try to escape from the authorities. Tension filled the air as people speculated about what Simpson would do next, unsure whether he would surrender or vanish. By around 6:00 p.m., Simpson called 911 to report his location, revealing that he was in the back seat of his friend Al Cowling's white Ford Bronco, holding a gun to his head. Slowly cruising down the freeway, the situation unfolded as a dramatic and tense scene, with the media capturing every moment. The chase drew millions of viewers who were riveted by the sight of Simpson threatening suicide while moving toward his home in Brentwood. This long, slow drive became a national spectacle, raising deep questions about how Simpson could later plead not guilty to the crimes when his actions that day appeared to suggest guilt. Each minute of the pursuit was marked by uncertainty and fear, leaving the public to wonder what would happen next as authorities carefully followed the vehicle along the freeway, negotiating a peaceful resolution while maintaining public safety and keeping the world glued to their screens. The Bronco moved at a crawl, surrounded by police cars and news helicopters, making it a surreal image of a former sports hero caught in a moment of personal and legal crisis, a scene replayed endlessly in news coverage that captured the shock, disbelief, and fascination of a nation watching one of its idols confront the consequences of a serious accusation. Years later, in an interview for Fox TV, O.J. Simpson tried to explain his actions in the most personal terms. He revealed that he felt as though he had lost all the respect and admiration he had built up over the years. According to Simpson, when his ex-wife and her friend were killed, it felt like a part of him died as well. He described the profound impact of their deaths on his sense of self. It was as if everything he had worked for, his career, his image, his life, was suddenly taken from him. Simpson expressed that in that moment, he felt as though his whole identity had been attacked and destroyed, leaving him lost and broken. The emotional weight of losing his ex-wife and her friend seemed to push him to a breaking point where he could no longer see a clear way forward. In this interview, Simpson tried to offer an explanation for the actions that would forever change his life. He spoke not just as a man who had faced legal trouble, but as someone grappling with the loss of everything he thought he knew about himself. His words reflected a deep sense of inner turmoil and pain, one that was tied directly to the tragic events of that night. At first, the trial of O.J. Simpson was supposed to take place in Santa Monica, the location where the crime occurred. However, there were concerns about potential bias due to the demographic makeup of Santa Monica, which was predominantly white. This led to the decision to move the trial to downtown Los Angeles. In the end, Simpson's jury was mostly composed of African Americans, which sparked some public speculation. Some people believed the move was intentional, aimed at avoiding a predominantly white jury that might not be sympathetic to Simpson's defense. One of the lead prosecutors, William Hodgman, however, denied these claims. According to Hodgman, it was standard procedure for major cases in Los Angeles County to be tried downtown. At the time, this was simply a logistical decision to keep the judicial process moving smoothly and efficiently. He emphasized that there was no intention behind the change to manipulate the jury or influence the trial in any way. Thus, while public perceptions of the trial's location and the jury's composition were contentious, the move was in line with typical practices for big cases within the county at that time. Hodgman explained that they wanted to start the trial and move forward without any delays. It was actually more of a practical decision than anything else. They knew the case would be tried downtown eventually, so they figured they might as well start there. This way, they could organize everything and get the trial going without any unnecessary delays or complications. The decision to begin proceedings early allowed the prosecution team to begin gathering their evidence and focusing on the essential parts of the case. They believed that by starting as planned, they could avoid the potential for more time wasted in delays. The strategic approach aimed to ensure that the process moved forward efficiently, avoiding the types of issues that could have caused setbacks later on. This allowed for better preparation, clearer organization, and a smoother process as the trial proceeded. The prosecution's goal was to maintain momentum while addressing the challenges that arose during the course of the case, always ensuring that every step was purposeful and timely. By beginning the trial promptly, they hoped to gain the upper hand in the legal proceedings and keep everything moving at the right pace. Prosecutors Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden were the lead attorneys in the trial against O.J. Simpson, but many legal experts noted that their strategy seemed unfocused and ultimately flawed. Instead of starting with the physical evidence that was crucial to the case, they chose to focus early on Simpson's alleged history of domestic violence against his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. This approach suggested a troubling pattern of behavior, but it diverted attention away from the hard evidence that could have built a stronger case. The prosecution's decision to highlight Simpson's past issues with domestic violence was an important element, but it wasn't the most pressing argument in a case that had solid forensic evidence to rely on. By dwelling on these allegations, the prosecution lost sight of the facts that could have made a decisive impact. The focus on minor details, such as Simpson's behavior or his character flaws, seemed to weaken the overall case. These distractions prolonged the trial, and Judge Lance Ito had to work hard to keep the proceedings on track. Legal experts, including author and attorney Scott Turow, pointed out that the prosecution's lack of focus was a major factor in the case dragging on for more than a year. This prolonged the trial, turning it into the longest criminal trial in California's history. Had the prosecution remained focused on the crucial physical evidence and the timeline of events, rather than getting sidetracked by peripheral issues, the outcome of the trial might have been very different. The trial of O.J. Simpson lasted for several months, with the prosecutors spending about 6 months just presenting their case. Turow, a key figure, pointed out that such a prolonged timeline can leave the jury with two impressions: either the evidence is overwhelmingly strong, or the prosecution is working hard every day to make it seem more convincing than it actually is. In this particular case, however, it seemed like the latter was happening. The trial became an extended series of arguments, evidence presentations, and legal wrangling. Many observers criticized the prosecution for losing focus and constantly getting distracted by minor, unimportant details. The prosecution's inability to maintain focus on the main objectives of the case possibly contributed to the jury's perception that the trial was being unnecessarily dragged out. This could have created doubts among jurors, influencing their final decision in a way that undermined the case's strength. As the trial wore on, the line between critical evidence and trivial issues became blurred, and this lack of clarity may have been a key factor in the outcome. O.J. Simpson's case has remained a source of intrigue and controversy for many years, largely because of the complexity of the events surrounding the trial. One aspect that garnered significant attention was the idea that Simpson may not have committed the crimes alone. The trial was convinced that Simpson had an accomplice, and as a result, authorities turned their attention to key individuals in his life. Al Cowlings, O.J.'s childhood friend and confidant, was one of those under suspicion. He was very close to Simpson, and became a figure of interest due to his relationship with him during the time of the murders. In addition to Cowlings, Jason Simpson, O.J.'s son from his first marriage, was also scrutinized as a potential accomplice. Despite the suspicion, there was no concrete evidence that could definitively link Cowlings or Jason to the crime. Investigators were assigned to keep a close eye on both men, trying to uncover any clues that might suggest they were involved. Sadly, no new evidence ever emerged that proved O.J. Simpson had an accomplice. The case continues to be one of the most high-profile and debated legal matters in modern history, but the mystery of whether he acted alone or had help remains unsolved. At the trial of O.J. Simpson, Mark Fuhrman's testimony turned out to be a major issue for the prosecution. Typically, the first officers at a crime scene provide critical testimony, especially when it comes to evidence. However, in this case, the prosecutors made a significant mistake by relying on Fuhrman. He was called to testify about the bloody glove found on Simpson's property, a key piece of evidence. Initially, Fuhrman's testimony seemed to go well for the prosecution. However, things took a dramatic turn during cross-examination by the famous defense attorney, F. Lee Bailey. Bailey asked Fuhrman if he had ever used a particular racist word, to which Fuhrman denied. Little did he know, the defense had secretly recorded Fuhrman using that word and expressing deeply racist views in interviews. This revelation raised suspicions about the integrity of Fuhrman's actions. It seemed possible that he might have planted the glove on Simpson's property, casting doubt on the evidence. When Fuhrman was later asked directly whether he had ever planted evidence, he refused to answer, invoking his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. This refusal only deepened the doubts surrounding his credibility. In a later interview with PBS, prosecutor William Hodson admitted that they were aware of Fuhrman's problematic past, but they chose to take a risk and rely on his testimony anyway. This decision ultimately backfired, causing significant issues for the prosecution's case and contributing to the challenges they faced during the trial. During the O.J. Simpson trial, one of the most shocking and memorable moments occurred during a demonstration involving the infamous bloody gloves that were found at both the crime scene and Simpson's estate. The prosecution, led by Christopher Darden, decided to have Simpson try on the gloves in court, a decision that would become one of the most widely criticized blunders in legal history. The gloves had been a central piece of evidence, and the prosecution believed that if they could show Simpson wearing them, it would help prove his guilt. Lieutenant, when Simpson stood up to try on the gloves, Judge Lance Ito instructed him to approach the jury. As Simpson struggled to put the gloves on, it became painfully obvious that they did not fit. The moment was met with stunned silence in the courtroom, and the frustration on Darden's face was clear. He had expected the demonstration to go much differently. Many people in the courtroom, including reporters, assumed that if the prosecution had gone forward with the demonstration, they must have been confident the gloves would fit. But the disaster was immediate and obvious. The failed demonstration became a turning point in the trial. It not only raised doubts about the credibility of the prosecution's case, but also allowed the defense to seize on the moment. Johnny Cochran, Simpson's defense attorney, famously used the gloves as part of his closing argument, delivering the line that would go down in history: "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This statement resonated with the jury and further undermined the prosecution's case. What was intended to be a key piece of evidence ended up becoming a crucial turning point in Simpson's defense, leading to one of the most controversial verdicts in American legal history. To this day, nobody knows for sure if Mark Fuhrman or other investigators planted evidence against O.J. Simpson. When you think about it, it doesn't seem to make sense for them to do so, considering how straightforward the case appeared to be. However, much of the defense's argument focused on casting doubt on the physical evidence. For instance, a defense expert suggested that a bloody sock might not have been worn when it came into contact with blood. Fuhrman's decision to plead the fifth, when questioned about possible evidence tampering, further fueled suspicions against the prosecution. In an interview with PBS, Simpson's defense attorney, Shan Chapman-Hawley, offered a possible explanation for why prosecutors might have considered planting evidence, even if they already believed Simpson was guilty. She suggested that they might have wanted to solidify their case, fearing they were losing, but they underestimated the thoroughness of the defense team. The defense ultimately uncovered any attempts to frame Simpson and exposed the prosecution's mistakes. This situation raises questions about the truthfulness of the evidence presented during the trial and the tactics used by both sides. It also highlights the challenges of high-profile cases, where public opinion and media attention can greatly influence legal proceedings, making it difficult to discern what really happened behind the scenes. Instead, the story took a surprising turn when the defense team for O.J. Simpson suggested that the detectives might have tried to make him appear guilty. They offered a different angle, saying the murders could have been connected to drugs rather than Simpson himself. They proposed that drug dealers may have come to Nicole Brown Simpson's house looking for her friend Faye Resnick, who had been staying there shortly before the killings. Resnick later became known for appearing on a television show and for writing books about the case. One of her books, Nicole Brown Simpson: The Private Diary of a Life Interrupted, was published in 1994, just as the jury was being selected. It revealed intimate details about Nicole's personal life and romantic relationships, but Resnick's credibility as a witness for the prosecution was questioned because of the personal nature of the book. Despite her strong belief that O.J. had abused Nicole and was responsible for her death, her accounts were not considered fully reliable in court. Later, in 1996, Resnick published another book, Shattered in the Eye of the Storm, which focused on how the trial had impacted her personally and emotionally, highlighting the stress and public scrutiny she endured while observing the legal proceedings and the media attention surrounding one of the most famous trials in recent history, showing that even those connected peripherally to the events experienced deep consequences and lasting memories that shaped their lives in unexpected ways. At the center of a media storm, the case involving O.J. Simpson took another strange turn when the name of an Italian shoemaker came up. Bruno Magli, a brand known for its luxurious shoes, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight when a bloody shoe print at the murder scene was identified as a perfect match to a size 12 of one of his original Bruno Magli Lorenzo boots. This discovery was highly significant, adding a strange and unexpected twist to the already convoluted case. Simpson, however, denied owning the shoes, despite the fact that there was evidence suggesting otherwise. Interestingly, photographs later surfaced showing O.J. Simpson wearing a pair of these very boots on at least 2 occasions, raising further suspicion. One of the key witnesses in the case was Sam Poser, who worked at the Bloomingdale store where O.J. had shopped. Poser recalled Simpson being friendly when trying on the shoes, but strangely, he couldn't remember if Simpson actually bought them. However, Poser did remember that O.J. ended up purchasing other comfortable clothes, not the Bruno Magli boots. Later, during the civil trial, a significant revelation emerged. It was discovered that O.J. Simpson had been photographed wearing the shoes at a Bills game, a finding that contradicted his earlier claims. This new evidence was critical, and it was agreed upon that Simpson had indeed worn the Bruno Magli boots. Tragically, this photograph was not discovered until after the criminal trial had concluded. Had it been found earlier, it is believed that it could have had a significant impact on the case, potentially leading to a different outcome. The prosecution's handling of the O.J. Simpson case raised many questions, particularly regarding key witnesses who were never called to testify. One of the most shocking aspects of the trial was how 2 crucial witnesses were completely overlooked. These missed opportunities could have changed the course of the case. Jill Shiv was a witness who almost collided with O.J. Simpson as he allegedly sped away from the crime scene. She saw him running red lights and racing through the streets in a way that could have corroborated the prosecution's timeline. However, Marcia Clark, the lead prosecutor, chose not to have her testify. The reason? Shiv had appeared on a tabloid TV show and sold her story for $5,000, which led Clark to question her credibility. As a result, this vital testimony was never heard by the jury. Similarly, Skip Junis, a man who had seen Simpson at the Los Angeles International Airport, also had information that could have been crucial to the case. Junis witnessed Simpson discarding something at the airport, which could have been important evidence. However, his testimony was never included in court, leaving Junis baffled and frustrated. He publicly stated that he didn't understand why the prosecution chose not to hear his account, especially given the significance of what he had seen. The failure to call these 2 witnesses, Jill Shiv and Skip Junis, was a major oversight by the prosecution. Their testimonies could have provided crucial pieces of evidence to strengthen the case against O.J. Simpson. The decisions to exclude them ultimately left the prosecution with one less advantage, and it raised further doubts about the effectiveness of their strategy during the trial. The O.J. Simpson trial became a landmark case for its complexity, and one of the most significant pieces of evidence was DNA. Gary Sims, a scientist, testified that the blood found in O.J. Simpson's car matched that of Simpson, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ronald Goldman. This was critical because O.J. Simpson and Goldman had no prior connection before Goldman's death. The presence of Goldman's blood in Simpson's car was compelling evidence. However, the importance of this evidence was somewhat lost during the trial. When Marcia Clark, the prosecutor, addressed the jury during her closing speech, she touched on the DNA evidence, but it got overshadowed by all the other points she was making. The jury might have been confused by the details, which detracted from the impact of the DNA testimony. Even experts like Hodgman on PBS later suggested that the defense and prosecution lawyers may have assumed the jury could understand the complicated scientific details they were explaining. This led to some miscommunication, as Christopher Darden, another lawyer involved in the trial, ended up reiterating points that Marcia Clark had already made, rather than emphasizing the importance of the DNA evidence. This lack of focus on the DNA proved to be a crucial factor in how the case unfolded, and it ultimately made it harder for the jury to grasp why the DNA evidence was such a big deal in determining Simpson's guilt. Many people today still believe that O.J. Simpson might have hurt his ex-wife and her friend, despite his not being found guilty in court. This has led to confusion, as it's difficult to understand how he was acquitted. Experts who discussed the trial on PBS pointed out that a football game might help explain why Simpson was let off. They mentioned that Simpson's defense team, led by skilled and experienced lawyers, performed exceptionally well. In contrast, the prosecution team was overconfident and not as professional, which led to their downfall. As a result, Simpson's legal team was able to exploit a system that had some flaws. However, one of Simpson's lawyers, Alan, has a different perspective. He believes that the trial actually showed how the legal system can sometimes work too well. In an interview with PBS, Alan explained that people tend to prefer an older system where the prosecution doesn't have to work as hard to prove their case. In this older system, trials did not always follow the rules set out in the Constitution, and the prosecution could sometimes overlook fairness with the evidence. This highlights how the legal process can sometimes create an outcome that is not what many people expect. O.J. Simpson's book caused a huge stir when it was announced in 2007. The book was initially titled "If I Did It, This Is How It Happened." The premise of the book was shocking, as it was about how Simpson would have committed the crime he was famously accused of, though he insisted it was just a hypothetical account. In an interview with Fox, Simpson discussed the crime in detail, suggesting how it could have happened. To many, this wasn't just an imaginary story, but a disturbing way of speaking about a crime that he had been acquitted of years earlier. The public reaction was swift and intense. People were appalled that Simpson would release a book like this, especially given the sensitivity of the case involving the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. The book was widely criticized, and before it could be officially published, the release was stopped. However, things took an unexpected turn. A court ruled that the rights to the book should go to Ronald Goldman's family. The Goldmans had already won a civil suit against Simpson for the wrongful deaths of Ronald and Nicole, and they were entitled to any financial proceeds from the book. The book was then published under the new title, "If I Did It: Confessions of the Killer," with an additional message from Ronald Goldman's sister, Kim. This version of the book was meant to remind readers that it wasn't just a theoretical story, but something that carried a heavy emotional weight for the victims' families. The profits from the book were redirected to pay back the Goldman family for the civil judgment Simpson had not yet fulfilled. The whole situation left many people perplexed, questioning Simpson's motives for writing the book in the first place, and the ethics surrounding its publication. The lie detector test that O.J. Simpson took has been a subject of intrigue for many years. The test, arranged by his lawyer Robert Pirro, gave a result of -24, a score that strongly suggested Simpson was lying. Despite this, the results of a lie detector test aren't admissible as evidence in court, but they can have a significant impact on how an investigation is viewed and how a defense is strategized. In 2016, when a TV show about Simpson's trial gained popularity, Alan D.T., who had been advising the defense team from Harvard, discussed the situation. He pointed out that only 4 people knew about the lie detector test: Simpson, his lawyer Robert Kardashian, Bob Shapiro, and the person who administered the test. This made the release of the results to the public a potential breach of lawyer-client trust. At the time, the public's reaction to Simpson's return to society was mixed. For many, especially those who remembered the trial, the infamous car chase, and Simpson's history of domestic violence, his comeback was difficult to accept. Simpson's lack of remorse only fueled the anger. After being acquitted of murder, Simpson made an attempt to confess to the killings through a book deal, titled If I Did It, which shocked and confused people even further. The cover was designed in a way that made the words "I did it" more prominent than the word "if," giving the impression that Simpson was taunting the public. This boldness was both disturbing and absurd. The whole situation seemed like a joke, but one that no one could laugh at. Simpson's behavior, his refusal to show any remorse, and his mockery of the situation turned his acquittal into something people couldn't take seriously. The public, forced to watch the trial unfold, began to question the very idea of justice. It was as though justice had failed completely, and the only way to cope was by turning the whole saga into a punchline. Shows like Saturday Night Live turned Simpson into a comedic figure, making light of the tragedy that had occurred. This left many wondering if they could ever forgive Simpson, even though he never sought forgiveness. The true question was whether they could forgive themselves for accepting the reality of what had happened. O.J. Simpson's time in prison for robbery, after his highly publicized acquittal of the 1994 murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, marked a strange turning point. While many felt some sense of relief when Simpson went to prison for a crime that seemed less significant than the earlier charges, it couldn't erase the weight of the previous trial's verdict. His acquittal had left a lasting scar, not just on the victims' families, but on public perception. Still, Simpson's sentence for armed robbery felt like a small step towards justice, but it came with an undeniable fear, the realization that he would one day be released again, potentially to return to the public eye. Since his release from prison in 2017, Simpson's relationship with the public has remained complicated. Unlike figures like Mike Tyson, who after serving time for rape was able to reconnect with the public and embrace a somewhat endearing yet flawed persona, Simpson has struggled to find his place. While Tyson's comeback was built on charm and public acceptance, Simpson hasn't been fully forgiven nor fully rejected. He occupies a strange space in the collective consciousness, where people are uncomfortable discussing his criminal past, yet they still enjoy his work, such as his appearances in Roots and the Naked Gun series. The question arises, why is it that one individual, convicted of a heinous crime against a woman, can be shunned for life, while another, clearly responsible for 2 murders, can return to a public life, and even make his criminal past seem less severe or, in some twisted way, charming? For the victims' families, though, the situation is far from resolved. While the world may have moved on, the pain remains, and the hope for true justice, for many, has never been fully realized. Fred Goldman, father of Ron Goldman, made it clear that his pursuit of justice never waned, even after O.J.'s death. Fred's words highlighted a deep sense of disillusionment with society's ability to hold Simpson truly accountable. For Fred, the pain didn't end with Simpson's passing, and forgiveness, as he saw it, was never an option. Instead, he expressed a call for continued effort, underscoring that while revenge may no longer be possible, there was still work to be done. This view challenges the idea that forgiveness is the only path to closure. For Fred Goldman and the families of the victims, justice remains a distant goal, one that has yet to be fully achieved. In the end, Simpson's story is a reminder that redemption and forgiveness are not always attainable by one's own efforts. True justice, as Fred Goldman pointed out, is something that cannot be bargained for or undone. Even though time moves on, the unresolved nature of O.J. Simpson's legacy continues to affect the families who were wronged, as well as the public's complicated view of his life and crimes. O.J. Simpson had his final conversation with his longtime lawyer, Malcolm Leverin, shortly before Easter, at Simpson's rented house near the Las Vegas Strip. Leverin recalled the moment vividly. Simpson was sitting on the couch, relaxed, sipping a beer, and flipping through TV channels. He seemed calm and at ease, and they spent the time catching up. Typically, it was Simpson who would update Leverin on news, but this time, it was more of a two-way exchange, with both men talking about their lives. That was the last significant conversation they had before Simpson's health began to take a sharp decline. About a week later, on April 5th, a doctor informed Leverin about Simpson's deteriorating condition. The doctor described it as Simpson's transition, a term that hinted at the inevitable end. By the time Leverin visited Simpson again, it was clear that the former football star's health had worsened. Simpson was no longer the strong, active man he once was. He was too weak to do much on his own, only able to ask for water, and choose between watching a golf tournament or a tennis match on TV. Simpson had been battling prostate cancer for over a year, and his body was no longer able to fight the disease. On April 10th, Simpson passed away at the age of 76, surrounded by his family. His body was cremated the following Wednesday morning, around 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Laverne confirmed this in a statement to CBS News. Simpson's family shared the news of his passing on April 11th, saying he had succumbed to his cancer while surrounded by his children and grandchildren. However, Laverne also mentioned that only one person was with Simpson at the time of his death. This individual, described as a close family member, was not named, as Laverne chose not to reveal their identity. Laverne, who had been handling Simpson's affairs since 2009, also reflected on his years working with the former sports icon. During Simpson's final months, they had several conversations. When asked about the possibility of Simpson confessing to any past wrongdoings, especially regarding his infamous trial, Laverne avoided the question. He felt that such a discussion would only divert attention from the gravity of Simpson's condition, turning it into another sensationalized moment. Additionally, Laverne made it clear that there were no plans to examine Simpson's body for signs of chronic brain trauma, despite the likelihood of Simpson sustaining head injuries during his 11 years in the NFL. With Simpson's passing, the focus remained on his health struggle, rather than revisiting the controversies of his earlier life, as Laverne believed this would distract from the man Simpson had become in his later years. The story of Simpson's final days remains a solemn reminder of the way public figures' legacies are shaped, both by their triumphs and their